Hello, animation fans, and welcome to another iAnimate podcast. I'm your host, Larry Vasquez, and you're listening to episode 97. In this episode, we have Valentin Amador joining us. Valentin has been at Walt Disney Animation Studios since Frozen and has worked on such titles as Big Hero 6, Zootopia, Moana, and has been a supervising animator on Encanto. He's one of our new feature instructors, and it was just a really neat opportunity to talk with him, pick his brain a little bit. He's got a 2D background. He's from Spain. He's worked in VFX, and now having worked at Walt Disney Animation Studios at one of the highest levels. It was just a really neat honor to talk with him, pick his brain about animation, and see what he's got to say. So check it out. All right. So you ready to jump into it?
Yep, let's go.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know, as I've mentioned this many times, you guys have schedules and lives and things like that. So it's always a neat honor to get you guys in on the podcast to take a little bit of your time and to talk about animation. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, I'm always curious on how people have kind of got into animation. I was looking at your bio, and you come from Spain. How did you get into animation? Is it something that you kind of always wanted to do, or is it something that kind of got a curveball, so to speak, and caught your eye here? So how did you get into animation?
I think that animation got into me.
Okay.
My parents always tell a story about taking me to the movies for the first time when I was 3 years old to watch Fantasia.
Oh, okay.
Which arguably, I don't think it's a children's movie. And they always joke that I was the only kid that wasn't asleep in the theater. I don't remember any of these, but I remember drawing since I have memories, and wanted to be an animator.
Gotcha.
Wanted to be a Disney animator because there was something about the style of animation, the illusion of life, if you want, that I found very aligned with my sensibilities. In a sense, is like I love all kinds of animation, but that type of animation, which nowadays it's not necessarily Disney, but that kind of performance animation, these putting the connection with the audience, the empathizing, the showing the thought process of a drawing. I found it like so mysterious. And then growing up, that kind of didn't fade away, but this was like probably when I was a kid, it was like during the 80s. Animation wasn't as prevalent in my life. And also growing up in Barcelona, it's not like now when you have like online schools and all that. It's not something that it's easy. And I remember watching The Little Mermaid. No, it was first Roger Rabbit and then The Little Mermaid that heralded this renaissance of animation that made it like something that I wanted to do. But then there were no available schools or anything. So I had to choose something to do in university, and I love science. So I started studying physics.
Okay. Which animation definitely has that in there, yeah.
Yeah, but also it's like you're okay with the 3 laws of Newton, which is the first thing that you see on the first day of the first course. Everything else was just, I don't know, my love of it. But after my first year in school, I was like, okay, this is what it's going to be my life. I don't want this to be my life. I want to be an animator. But also, again, back in those days, even though there was a Disney Renaissance, it was Disney, we were in Spain. It wasn't that easy, and I was like, I don't know, 17, 18 years old. So I was like, okay, I'll go to some animation school in Barcelona. And in the meantime, I'll keep studying because my parents wanted me to get a degree because it's like animation. Well, sure, but first you finish your studies, And yeah, I finished, but I already was working animation in some studio in Barcelona while I was finishing my degree.
So your degree is in physics?
Yeah, in
Gotcha.
astrophysics.
Okay.
Which I still love. I still like keep track of everything that's going on. I
That's
read
amazing.
Science books.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's really, really cool.
Well, it's kind of
it's like the old Renaissance type deals where there were men that were artists and builders and tinkers, and so it was just this whole aspect of it. So no, that's very, very cool.
Yeah, I think I'm in this in-between generation between the old type animators and the new ones, which are much more professional, just in some of schools. But back in the day when I was starting, nobody around me had studied animation.
Okay.
I met like architects, I don't know, electricians, what you name it, because animation was a passion that you learn like in kind of almost like a craft that you learn in as an apprentice in animation studios and things like that, I remember thinking about going to CALAR, something like that, but it was so expensive, and my parents were like, well, if I spend that much money in your education, we have to spend the same amount of money on your brother and your sister, and we don't have that amount of money. So I was like, oh, you're destroying my future. Big like teenage tantrum and all that.
So now did you start, you said after you had graduated, you were already kind of working in some of the animation there? Was that?
Yeah, I was working in Barcelona in whatever work was available, which is something that at the time it made me miserable because I was like, when you're a teenager and it's like, I want to be at Disney. I don't want to be in some other studio. But I think that over the years, I've realized that every single part of my journey has made me the artist that I am.
Yeah.
And funny enough, things that I learned back then are so useful now, because you never know when you're going to need some resource that you've learned, from somewhere. And most importantly of all, it has allowed me to meet so many different kind of people, because Disney is amazing in many ways, but it also can be isolated because you're in a bubble.
Yeah.
You're always working in the same place. It's not that you have to hustle to get another job in another studio and then you meet a completely new kind of people, and that now I appreciate it so much,
Gotcha.
That it wasn't like going from like animation school to just one studio and stay there. I've traveled the world.
Yeah.
But back then it was like working somewhere. I worked for a few years in this small studio in Barcelona. And when you know nothing, everything is a lesson, and I work in some things that were not as challenging, but it gave me like knowledge of meeting deadlines and getting along with your team. And then there was some things that were like being more challenging and I can see myself growing. I would go to live drawing lessons. I would go to the zoo. I would watch every Disney special on TV, and then I would record on my VHS and I would frame through it, guerrilla style animation school. And then eventually you move to other jobs and you keep like looking for something like, okay, this job might not be what you want, but it might allow you to get another job that might be closer to that,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I'm actually working on a really fun project right now, but the quote is about 20 seconds a week. And I'm like, which is pretty quick, but it's one of those things I'm going, it's making me faster. It's making me have to plan out earlier and be more decisive and things like that. So it kind of goes back to what you were saying here. You learn certain things depending on what the circumstances are at that studio or whatever. So it's always a great lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You always, at least when you're young, you like many things in life, you realize that afterwards, in the moment. I was like all frustration. It's like, I want to be at Disney. What am I doing here?
Now, correct me if I'm wrong too. I forget, it might've been Conan Lowe who I did a podcast with. He was at DreamWorks in their layout department, but he had worked with the company that did Area 51.
Ilion?
Yeah, Ilion there in
Yeah.
Spain.
Yeah.
And he really, really loved working in Spain and just the culture there and just talking about such a history in regards to art and stuff. Was that something that you, obviously growing up there, took as well? Just that history of
Yeah,
art?
definitely. Yeah. That was something that, again, I appreciated afterwards.
Okay.
But mostly the lifestyle, the work-life balance in Spain is so good.
Yeah.
And then Spain is one of the countries in Europe that has the longest history in animation and really good reputation of artists. And then what I appreciated is that there was like, when I moved from Barcelona, Barcelona's history of animation had been mostly with TV shows. And then at some point I felt that I had hit a ceiling, and I moved to Madrid, because in there there were some studios that had back in the days worked with Disney. And there were studios that were doing European animated movies, which is what I wanted to do. And then I moved to Madrid, and I became in contact with people that had either worked, not necessarily at Disney, but maybe with Tom Bluth or some kind of Rich Williams, like luminaries of like this type of animation that is not necessarily done just by Disney now, but had been done in Europe. And that's when I think I began to learn for real, like people that had come back from working with Bluth in Ireland, or back in the States when he went to, I think it was Arizona, where he set up the studio. Some people were coming back from Disney. This was like late 90s, when the Renaissance period had passed, and then maybe working there wasn't as fulfilling for them, or they miss their home country.
Gotcha.
And they started coming back, and then apart from the books that I had read, then working with them was like the biggest, like it was my biggest leap in terms of craft and knowledge and all that. But yeah, Spain is an amazing place for that. And still now it's kind of it. The thing is that I left Spain because it was late to transition into computer animation, and I needed, by the time I was good enough to go work in a major studio, the industry had changed.
Because you were doing 2D at that time, right?
Still? Yeah. I was just doing 2D, and it was hard to find animation studios that would hire me, because also back in those days, there was a sense of like disconnect in the culture of CG and 2D. It felt like CG was the new thing, and 2D was kind of 2D people were kind of old fashioned, and it was hard to be hired, even though I would make the case animation is animation, but also I can understand why animation is animation, but also you need to be productive. So you need to work the software. It's not just, oh, I know the principles, but it's going to take me three times the time that it takes somebody that knows computer animation to animate these, you know? So it was hard. And then I moved to London, which is another country that has a long tradition in animation. But now in Spain, there's like, again, like one of the best animation cultures in the world there, plus the lifestyle, which is amazing.
Yeah. And I know right now you're a supervising animator at Walt Disney Animation Studios, right?
Yeah. Well, the supervising animator role is something that is per movie. I just finished supervising, but now we just finished a movie where I was an animator.
Okay.
I'm at supervise again. It's a per project, movie, but yeah,
You've been in that role and think,
that role, yeah.
I just was curious. I'm going to, would you ever, do you have any desires to move back to Spain, or is it, hey, look, this is my talent and I enjoy this place and this is the place I can do this at?
This is a place for me. Still, I'm excited about working at Disney. I'm kind of, it pays off to stay at a place where you can establish like personal relations to the people that you're working with, where you feel safe to try new things and grow as an artist, because the projects are always challenging. Yeah. And when you kind of, you've proven yourself enough to be a supervising animator, that is a good place to try things, or maybe, you know, like to kind of combine your own personal interest as an artist with the demands of production. It's like, I want to explore these type of shots, and they would trust you with them because you've been there for a while and they know that you're good, and you've been a supervisor. So in that sense, it's good. I love my people at Disney, their friends, their family. We've been through so much together. There's been moments in my life that I've seen them more than my family.
Gotcha.
But at the same time, there's always that homesickness, you know.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And it's hard to be away from your loved ones, your family. You know, your parents grow older, and it's like, oh, and you know, it's expensive to be there. We don't get that many vacations in the US. So
Yeah.
it's like
Kind of going back to that work-life balance you're talking about. That's really neat over there in Spain, huh?
Yeah. I keep saying when I retire, I'm going to retire there. And for now, that's for sure. Maybe sooner. I don't know. Also, the industry is changing so much. Maybe in a few years, you can work from anywhere.
Gotcha.
You know?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
We'll come back to your time at Disney. I'm just kind of curious though too, because you mentioned a lot of the 2D stuff, and I noticed on your bio here that you worked on The Illusionist.
Yes.
Yeah, that was and it's been a long time since I've seen it, but I just remember how kind of endearing it was. It was a really fun show.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny because I had a podcast with Pierre Perifel a couple back, and I noticed he worked on that one too. So
yeah.
Were you guys at the same time?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because that was a long production.
Okay, was it?
Yeah, and I was at the beginning, but then I left like 6 months after that for the reasons that I was telling you, because I got offered a job in computer animation, my first job in computer animation. And man, that was a tough time because I love that project and I love the people working there. Full that on the animation director, that guy's a hero. I love him so much. That was a tough movie to make.
Gotcha.
And Sylvain Chomet is he's such a bigger than life character.
Okay.
You know? I remember telling him that I needed to leave the project, not because I didn't want to work on it, but because I had this opportunity that I didn't know if it was going to present itself again.
Right.
You know, it was so hard to get hired in an animation studio, and Framestore was preparing a feature film called The Tale of Despereaux, and the animation director.
Yeah, another one I like a lot.
Yeah. That was a cool project. I suffer a lot through that one. I can tell you about that later.
Okay, yeah, we'll get back on that one.
My first like trial by fire.
Okay.
My first CG project, but the animation director he came from 2D too, and we both worked at a 2D animation studio in London that used to work for DreamWorks.
Okay.
He worked on Spirit. I worked on Sinbad.
Okay.
And because of that, and because he liked my reel, and he was open-minded enough, having come from 2D and then made the transition into CG, to bet on somebody like me. So those circumstances were very specific, and I love working at The Illusionist. It was such a special project. It was almost like at the time like a swan song for 2D animation.
Okay, very cool.
Because everything around us, the world was changing, everything was going CG, and this was Sylvain Chomet. It was a style that was so unique.
Uh-huh.
There was so much love put into that movie, and it also was a movie about an illusionist, like an old vaudeville act.
Yeah,
that was being displaced by, you know, pop music and like cinema. So it was like a 2D movie about a dying art. There was all this sense of melancholy in it. I love that project.
Very cool. I'll have to watch that one again. It's been a long time, like I said, but I remember when I watched it, it was just like, that was cool.
Yeah. Sylvain Chomet took me to a pub and told me his vision for the movie. And, well, man, we got drunk. And we cried. It was like, listen, I hear all that you're saying, but I feel that this project is going to end you're not a factory, you're an artist, you're gonna end this movie, and then we're all gonna be fired, as it's been happening since forever in Europe. This is one of the good things about Disney, you know, that you stay and you're able to grow. But in that case, it's like, man, I'm gonna finish this, and it's gonna be the best experience of my life, and but then I'm gonna be unemployed, and who knows if
How
I'm
quickly?
gonna be able to
Yeah.
get another CG job, you know?
Yeah.
And he understood, but then I remember he said to Paul Dutton, so Sylvain was the animation director, Paul Dutton was the Sylvain was the director of the movie, Paul Dutton was the animation director, and and Paul told me later, it's like, yeah, after you went for lunch with Sylvain, he came, it's like, working with Spanish animators is so hard, they're so emotional. Which is true, but also he was even more emotional than me. Good times.
That's funny. That's great, man.
Yeah.
So then that's the project you went from to The Tale of Despereaux.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how much CG did you know before going into that one?
I knew a little.
Were you just training on your own, or how did that come about?
I after working on Sinbad in London in this studio that I told you about, that used to do like a bit of sequences for DreamWorks.
DreamWorks, yeah.
I was like, I'm set. I got my foot on the door. I'm gonna work in a big American studio. And then Sinbad was the last 2D film that DreamWorks did. The whole industry was going CG. So I came back to Spain, to Madrid, and there was this animation school that was like in Madrid, and they contacted me to teach. And I was like, let's do this. I teach animation to your students, and you teach me computer animation.
Yeah, that's awesome.
In some sort of payment, you know? Which is great. It's like one of those things that, like, Spain is an amazing place, like, for like human interaction, and like it's a humanist place. So it's like, I don't know if that would work somewhere else, but it was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. You know, like, we share knowledge, we help each other grow. And after that, I was animation director on this movie called Nocturna. It's a 2D movie.
Okay. Which one was that one?
Nocturna.
Okay. Oh,
and
as a little blue character?
Maybe.
Okay, I don't remember.
The palette is kind of gray blue. It happens at night. There's this huge balloon guy and this kid. Amazing movie. One of the best movies that I've worked in 2D. It was produced by Filmax, company set in Barcelona, and at the same time they were making a CG movie. So when we finished work on that one, on Nocturna, which was 2D, I asked if I could work in the CG one, so I could apply what I was learning and all that. And I did some shots. Like, it wasn't a long before they wrapped up production on that one either. But I had a few shots in my curriculum. So I knew a bit of computer animation, but I didn't know that much.
You weren't as proficient, but you could at least say, "Hey, look, I've done this." And
yeah, exactly. It's not like hire me as an act of charity, but it was a bet, definitely, and gotcha. I will forever grateful to Gabriele for hiring me on that project. And then I knew it was on me, so there was a lot of late nights, you know, to even do the most simple things. Gotcha. Like, I would get like gimbal look, and I would be like, "What?" You know, it's like, and
how can I fix this? Yeah,
there was some friends there that would like teach me a little bit, and also it's like, just by having a fire under you, like, you have to finish and you have to be on time. So that also is a very good teacher.
Kind of going back to what you said, those lessons that you learn, you know, in each studio and position. It kind of brings me back to that adage, don't despise small beginnings, you know?
No, absolutely. No. And also, you can learn something from everybody, you know? and you don't know from who or what is it going to be. So you need to stay open. You need to stay ambitious. You need to know if this is what you want or when you've hit a ceiling. But you need to be gracious about leaving. You need to be mindful of your compromises to the company that is paying you. What I'm saying is that don't leave like halfway through a shot, you know? But also, if you need to move on, like I did with the Illusionist, it's like, don't burn your bridges, be gracious to everybody, but it's a balance. You need to stay open to whatever you're going to learn. If you have to work on something, you might as well make the most out of it. But also be ambitious and keep getting jobs. When I finished Despereaux, I stayed in London and I had to hustle to build a network, you know, as I go show my demo reel to the studio, to this other studio, and I started getting another kind of jobs. And I was like learning computer animation, you know. And the cool thing is that the more I learned the computers, the more I could see me going back to my 2D self, you know. Because at the beginning it felt very disconnected. It's like, how do I apply all these things that I've learned through all these years through this new tool? And then the more you learn the tool, the more you begin to kind of
feel comfortable enough to
bring those two worlds together. So I always say that it's a bit misleading when people say animation is animation, you know. It's true, but also the medium shapes so much of what you can do that you need to master the medium before you can say animation is animation. You just think about animation.
Gotcha.
You know? It takes practice and years.
Yeah. I think it was Jason Ryan who said something like animating with boxing gloves on, you know, when you kind of first jumping into something like that, you feel like I can't quite, you know, but I can see where now the time goes on, you're like, oh, okay, I'm feeling more at home now, you know?
Yeah. The good thing is that I knew what I wanted. I knew what I wanted to see on the screen. You know, because that's what you know with like practice in animation and having like had a career behind you. But I knew that, but I didn't know how to get there. Or at least how to get there in like a reasonable amount of time so I could go to bed before 2 a.m.
I'm here. I hear you, man. That's like I said, on this project I'm on right now, there's been some many late nights that are on me because I'm trying to keep up with that, you know. But it's worth it because, like I said, you know, or you've mentioned here, that growth that you get during that. So it's worth it. Now, do you approach CG in the same way that you did with your 2D, or has that evolved and modified throughout the years?
It has evolved, definitely.
Okay.
It depends a bit on the project. Shot. I made the mistake of, not the mistake, because I still do it, but doing a 2D pass before I start animating a shot.
Okay.
It's good in some things, but I would find myself in a world of pain when polishing, for instance. Like, because I was like, in computer animation, like going from one pose to another is as important as the pose. You need to have, your brain needs to work in a kind of different way, because otherwise you find like gimbal logs or like the sense of spacing is completely different, because most of your 2D animation, you do it on twos. Computer animation is done on ones. And that's a massive thing. You almost need to train yourself, your sense of timing.
Right.
You know, it's almost second nature to you after a while in 2D animation, but you need to rediscover that. The spacing is different. Like you keep a perfect track of like a volume in space. In computer, drawing is a bit more graphic. So I would like almost animate a shot in 2D, and sure, I would get some insight into like my key posts and timing, but then I would run into a lot of like, I don't know, I would move one control to get to one pose, and I would move another one to
gotcha.
Get to, you know?
Yeah.
You need to learn how to, you know, drawing, you're almost like moving. It's like almost like a hybrid in between 2D and stop motion.
Yeah.
Computer animation. So those things that were like huge gaps in the spacing that would work in 2D because it's not as consistent in terms of like the volumes and all that. So I still thumbnail if it's like a shot that it needs to be broad. I would do a 2D pass maybe. If I'm using video reference and I don't like it, I don't like the way it's coming up because it's too video referencey.
Mm-hmm.
I would put my 2D hat on and I would like maybe push the spacing or like speed up the timing. So I think I use drawing all the time. I use the principles of drawing all the time.
Gotcha.
Like 100% of the time. Because a lot of the principles apply, like line of action, silhouette, like trying to get like curves against straight lines, the principles of appeal.
Nice.
Distortions, like working to the camera. All those things, I use them 100% on every single shot. More specific tools, it depends on the shot.
Do you approach your shots like you do a drawing, or do you work a layer approach, or has that changed, or does it depend upon the shot too? If it's more actiony, or if it's more subtle?
Yeah, that's definitely evolved.
Gotcha.
The last few years, I've been working more and more in Spline from the beginning.
Okay.
And I find it fascinating because your timing changes. Your timing is a bit more inventive, I think.
Okay.
Because you're almost talking, there's this dialogue between the shot and you. When you're working in Spline, you're seeing almost in real time, you're almost sculpting in time. When you work in pose to pose instead, you sculpt the pose and you begin with a timing. But I noticed that my options are always a bit more conservative when I'm timing, because like, oh, I'm gonna give like 4 frames to this little mini like taking here. But then if I'm working on Spline from the beginning, even though it's very rough and I know there's a lot of things to polish, I right away, because I'm working in the kind of the timing that on once from the beginning, I can get away with it in twos, you know? So I'll give two frames to that thing. And then, I don't know, there's something that I find interesting.
About working in Spline.
Yeah, but also with a very pose-to-pose approach in the sense of like, pose is king. You're pushing the pose. I feel that for like the kind of animation that I work in, a pure layer approach gives way to weaker posing in terms of storytelling and appeal.
Okay.
Which is something for a more realistic animation, for visual effects, it's actually better because you want your creature to work in a real world. So you don't want it to be like as like pose to pose oriented.
Right.
But for the kind of animation that I do, still pose to pose. Like, so I work a lot on the poses, but maybe I would hit Spline from the beginning and then start like, you know, polishing and making it like
shaping it that way.
Yeah.
There's really something to a stepped approach. But I took a workshop with Tal Schwartzman, and I think it was he that kind of mentioned it. The stepped kind of cheats your eye, you know, and so it can kind of deceive you a little bit too, which is why once you kind of start hitting Spline, sometimes you can look that mushy and like, okay, how do I get back to this and stuff like that? Yeah. So there's always pros and cons to every workflow, but I think that's one of the benefits of working in Spline. You can kind of start tightening up your timing, already seeing it a little bit in that. That's
and it's like, there's a sense of confidence in the fact that you are seeing the problems from the beginning. Whereas in psychologically, you invest so much in your post-to-post thing, and then you hit Spline, and it's like, oh my god, nothing is working. But you know, you think that you've arrived when you finish your blocking, and then it's like almost going back to
taking steps back. Yep.
Yeah, and then when you know from the beginning all those things, it's almost as if you're like, to me, in my mind, is a lot like sculpting in time. It's like everything is kind of amorphous at the beginning, in there, but then you begin to do things, and then you try new things because you know how you're doing in terms of time. Like in your schedule, it's like, okay, this is kind of working already, and I have 4 more days. I can try, and it's like, try new ways of blinking, for instance, because it's like it's almost as if you're getting results in real time.
Yeah. Gotcha.
When you're posing, you trend, even if you don't want to, you trend to go a bit the conventional things. Okay, I did this posing here, now I'm gonna do this blink, and I'm gonna close the eyes.
Yeah.
And then you're splining, and then it's like, oh wait, what happens? I can remove this key. It's still working, and it gives this kind of weird sense of something about it that feels new, like a blink.
Yeah. So you feel like with that, you get less, for lack of a better term, cliche-y, or yeah. You get a little bit more.
Not saying that what you get in post to post is always cliche.
Right.
But this is the way my brain works. I don't know if every person is different, but yeah, it allows for me to kind of step up my comfort zone. Maybe because I'm coming from 2D. Or maybe because I've been working in CG for so long with like post to post that I'm out of my comfort zone, and then suddenly a little crutches that I tend to use, even if I'm not aware, are not available.
So you have to be willing to explore a little bit more. Yeah.
But
that's awesome.
At the same time, it feels like a complex shot that I have like a week to do, and I'm like, man, if I start splining before I get to something that I can show, it's going to be day 4.
Yes. Yeah.
And then please don't destroy it with notes, because otherwise I'm going to be late. So then maybe I know I can show something post to post in 2 days. Then I would go to post to post.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask you too, because I've noticed as well, it's easier to show something in stepped because it's not so messy yet. You can kind of keep it, and so it makes it a little easier to show for a director. Or So one of the things I've been trying to do a little bit too is kind of animating in Spline, but then hitting it instead, and I can see, okay, is it working here? Yeah, okay, and then kind of go back to Spline a little bit. And is that something you've found as well?
Yeah, totally.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because sometimes I would just go to the poses and be on a Spline from the beginning, but I would just show the poses of my first look to directors. Or sometimes I would like, if the shot is going well, you just render it on twos, and then a lot of the mistakes that are still there, not mistakes, but you haven't had time to polish everything. Right. But you can show something pretty comprehensive already on twos. Yeah. Which is always, right now it's my favorite option. Okay. Because I feel that I don't like showing something that is just very like just a few poses. Because if I hadn't put enough information in there to show my idea, maybe they're gonna make me change it because I haven't had the time to
communicate yet everything.
Convincing enough that this is gonna work.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So my first look is always the moment when I'm doing what I want, and then it's gonna go through a process that I love and hate at equal parts, which is like people telling you what to do, it's my idea. Why are you taking it?
That's been the one balance I've been trying to get to, where it's that, again, that adage, show and show often, but yet going, okay, but is there enough there that I feel like it's worth showing, that I've communicated enough here. Yeah. So
no, it's definitely something, when I supervise, I'm super aware of that. Okay. And I welcome pushback. If the pushback is showing me that you thought about what you've done and you put it in for a reason, it's like, okay, let's talk about it. If maybe it's because I'm Spanish, I don't know. But I love passionate people. And it shows when you put passion in your work. Okay. And if you are showing me your very best, how are you not gonna get mad? Okay. You have to be professional. You have to be respectful. But also, you should fight for what you believe in, Also, read the room, Some directors welcome that. Some don't be stupid, But if as a supervisor, I encourage that. You know, it's like, okay, I don't want to, you know, it's like, I don't want to get too micromanaging when I give notes, because I appreciate this is such an extremely vulnerable moment. You're showing something, and if you really are doing your best, at least you're gonna get sad about it. You know, it's not. You shouldn't be cavalier about giving notes to somebody. You know, that it's like, if something is like, I don't know, mechanics, it is not working, you want to make a contribution, and also you have an advantage, which is that you have fresh eyes. You come with fresh eyes. You can always get too involved. So that's why I say I hate and love that process, like in equal parts.
Yeah.
Because it's my baby, and you're like killing it. Like, you have to kill your babies. But also, I've been so invested in my shot. I've been living with these 4 seconds for a week, and somebody's looking at it with fresh eyes. So there's an advantage in that you've lost, you know?
Yeah. For sure. Sure.
Something that I do, like a bit like a side apart, is like every morning when I'm working on a shot that it's advancing off, before I leave, I do like a render, like a play blast. Okay? First thing I do in the morning, I look at it.
Gotcha.
Because it's the only time that I have, like, I don't know, 8, 12, 3 hours in between, you know, when I left and when I come back in the morning, and it's the pressure I can look at it, you know?
Yeah.
But then it goes away the rest of the day. The third time that you see the play blast, you go work at 9, and 9:10, you've already lost that, you know? So you're showing it to people, and it's good. It's made me way better than I thought I could be.
Gotcha.
But it's painful also.
Yeah. Well, okay. So how did you get from Europe, Barcelona, over to Disney?
So I applied to Disney in so it was basically, I got there through an interview, but it was my 3rd interview. I had been turned down twice before.
Okay.
First time was like beginning of the 90s. I applied to Disney in Florida because Disney was promoting a movie, I don't remember which one, and they sent like some animators to tour like cities, and the show came to Barcelona, and I approached the Disney animator that was there, and he was like, he saw my work. I was working in Barcelona in that studio. And he's like, yeah, your work is cool. Like, send me a demo. I can show it. I went to visit him in Florida. I was working at the studio back at the time. Disney had a studio in Florida.
Yeah.
And then they told me, we love your work, but you're not experienced enough to get a visa. And you're experienced enough to not be a trainee, but you're not experienced enough to be hired as a full-time worker on a visa.
Gotcha.
We recommend you to apply to Disney in Paris. So I applied to Disney in Paris, and they said, we love your work, but we just hire a lot of people. You would be open to enter as an in-betweener. And then I thought about that, and I talked to some Disney people that had come back to Spain, and they told me, don't go in as an in-betweener, because you're going to be an in-betweener. Disney's hiring animators to animate. They're hiring in-betweeners to in-between. Sure, you can climb the ladder, but it's going to be harder for you because they have a constant supply of animators applying. Why would they promote somebody that is good at being an in-betweener?
And have to now find an in-betweener now too. And
exactly. So it's like, we recommend you apply as an animator. You know, you want to be a Disney animator, you apply as an animator.
Interesting.
And that was one of the best pieces of advice that I've got.
Gotcha.
Maybe my eager self would have gone as an in-betweener. I would have burned out even before I could be an animator. So I worked on like studios in Madrid, and then I worked in London all the time, trying to get better projects. I was a very important moment in my career was when this guy called Manolo Galeana all-time Spanish Disney animator, have been working with Don Bluth for a long time. He came back to Madrid. This was 2001. And I was working in this small studio, and he came to work in this. They opened this big animation studio in Madrid, big money behind it. But they contact another animation studios around Madrid, and I was working there, and they offered me to be a supervising animator in this movie. And one of the good things about working in small studios is that you have access. There's less competition for big roles where you can grow as an artist.
Gotcha.
And then I was a supervising animator on this movie that Manolo Galeana was working on as animation director, and I learned so much from him. Not just the craft, but also as a professional, as a human being. He's somebody that even now, well, now he's maybe too old for that, but not that long ago, he would move somewhere to work. He worked at the Illusionist.
Oh, okay.
He came when I had been there for a few months, and he was probably back then he must have been in his mid-50s. He was the youngest guy in the crew.
Yeah.
He was as passionate as animation as his first day.
Awesome.
I don't know if you remember the movie at the beginning when he's working in this theater in London, and then this pop band, what would be a pop band back then, I think it's set in the 60s, these guys all dressed in white suits like the Beatles with all these fans. They come to town. He gets booked out of the theater because this act is way more popular. If you watch the movie again, he animated this. He did all these crazy moves of these guys like crawling on the ground, like when they're performing.
That's awesome.
I think something like that. I don't know. Amazing animator, amazing human being. And he would go to the pub with all of us, and he would be surrounded by always the younger people telling stories about animation. I love him. I love him so much.
You know, one of the things I love about this is that I've talked to people like, hey, what was your favorite production? And oftentimes, you know, the movies are what they are and people love those. But a lot of the times it just goes back to who you worked with and that kind of stuff. So it's just neat for me when you're talking about that kind of stuff. You're looking back and you're like, man, that was just great. You know, those are the memories, you know? Yeah.
That's what you take with you at the end of your career. And so working with them was amazing. Then Sergio Pablos came back from Disney, having finished Treasure Planet. And Sergio Pablos is one of the best animators in the world, period.
Yeah.
And then I supervised on another project with him, and I learned so much from him. And then I was animation director on Nocturna, and his studio did like 60% of the animation on that movie. So I was at his studio for a long time working on that project. And then, as I told you, it was like I work on Sinbad in London. Everything was changing. Went to work in London, working there for 5 years, working on some things will be more like performance animation, some things that be more like VFX animation. Got to work in some cool projects, met amazing people. Again, I love London. It's also such a community because you might not work in the same studio for more than 4 months, but all the studios are in Soho, and then you go from one studio to another, and then you meet new people, but also you meet old people that you've worked with in another project somewhere else.
Gotcha.
You know, it's like it takes some effort, and it's scary at the beginning because the longest contract you might have is going to be 4 months.
Okay.
You know, but once you work everywhere and you work your ass off to be a good professional, you get hired again. So you finish in one studio, then you go to another, you know, and it's always like the same area, so your commute doesn't change too much.
Mini reunions.
Yeah. People go to the pub after that. So it's like maybe you go to this pub because you're going to meet the people from Framestore, or you're going to meet the people from D-Neck on that one because it's closer to there. But they all
cool.
like 10 minutes working this. You know, it's like, it's great. And then one day, oh wait, so I got hired to be supervising animator on a movie being made in Spain, southern Spain, in Granada, amazing city. And it was the first time that I got offered a job as a supervising animator on a movie that was like more like performance animation, the kind of style of Disney animation in computer animation.
Oh, okay.
So I thought that was a great opportunity. So I went there for a year, and as it happens in Europe, projects, it's very hard for the studios to keep the people because the financing doesn't allow to cover the gaps in between movies. So people are let go.
Yeah.
So my plan was gonna be go back to London. So I was in London visiting some friends. This was November 2012, and Disney came to town. And I had met this other amazing ex-Disney animator in Granada, had left Disney, moved back to Spain. We met in London, then he came to work also in Granada with me. He was supervising animator on Ben, the robot in Treasure Planet.
Okay.
And he also animated the Hydra in Hercules, like the first major computer animation character in a Disney movie. He was truly a pioneer of like how to bring the Disney style to computer animation. Learn a ton from him, great friend of mine. And he told me, hey, Disney's hiring in London. And I was supposed to, it was like, I don't know, interviews are like Wednesday and Friday. Oh, sorry, Wednesday and Thursday or something. I was supposed to leave the Sunday before.
Uh-huh.
I was like, no, never mind. I've applied twice. It's not going to happen. But then my friends were like, well, we're going to go to a Marilyn Manson concert on Wednesday. Why don't you stay, go to the concert with us? We have a spare ticket. And then you can go to this Disney interview. It's like, okay, I'll go see Marilyn Manson. and went to the concert, and then I went to the interview. I'm saying I'm going to go see Marilyn Manson because I told myself that I wasn't going to be hired, so I didn't want to get too excited about it. But at the same time, now I look at it and it's like, man, you knew you were going to do the interview. Who were you fooling? You knew you were going to stay. So it's like I talked to my roommate at the time. It's like, listen, this is the password to my computer. You need to send me. You need to put my demo reel on my Google Drive so I can access from a friend of mine. And here's his computer. I didn't. You
didn't have it with you?
No, I was on vacation in London. I was like, I'm gonna move here in a few months. I'm finishing the movie back in Spain. I'm visiting friends. I had been living in London for 5 years. I missed it. I was gonna go back, and then this happened, and went to the interview. I got hired. That's
amazing. And that was that for Disney there in London?
Yeah.
Okay.
They were traveling. Renato, who it's funny how things, like, you never know when somebody that's going to be important in your life happens,
Yeah.
Went to this interview at this hotel, and they booked a suite in there, and there was Renato, who saw my demo reel, loved it, gave me a couple of notes, like, come back later in the afternoon with this thank you, and we're going to send your demo reel to Disney to be reviewed by other people. It's not just me, but I'm going to put a good word for you. And he basically got me into Disney.
Man, that's great.
And he got me into Disney on the strength of because my CG animation had gotten better, but there was a bit of a mix of performance animation, character animation, and VFX.
Yeah.
It was like, take out all your VFX, because this is not what we do at Disney. But I was like, but then there's going to be a lot of 2D, and it's like, that's fine, So it was great in a way that all my 2D work was a substantial part of the demo reel that went into Disney to work on computers.
That's amazing.
And that's how I got there. And he was my animation director when I was supervising on Encanto. He was the animation director. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So now that was hired in London. Was it for work in London, or did they?
No, it was to LA.
So that's where you're able to get the passport and come out that way.
Yeah.
So what was your first project then at
What
Disney?
is it?
What was your first project there at Disney?
Frozen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
They had begun. So yeah, our cycles usually, we always release movies on Thanksgiving. We start animation from around November, October of the previous year until August of that year. So they were starting animation on Frozen when I got hired.
Okay.
But because of the visas and everything, had to wait 3 months. So it started in February 2013 on Frozen 1.
Okay. So now obviously you can animate, you've got some great skills. As you mentioned, you had some of your demo reel on the CG wasn't quite, where you want it to be. What was some of the biggest hurdles coming into such an established studio like Disney in regards to not only animation, but CG animation now at this time? What were some of the biggest, whole new world opening up for you there that you had to adjust?
You're working in a studio that's been established for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have been working there for a long time. It was a period of expansion. Tangle had done very well, so they were hiring a lot of people. So I had a lot of new people around me.
Okay.
But you were stepping into some big shoes. Not just, let me tell you, the biggest hurdle was inside of me, in my head. It was like, this is your dream job. You got the email saying that you're hired, and this is the email that you've been waiting for all your life. Then the biggest hurdle was psychological.
Gotcha.
Like, am I good enough? Is this gonna be like, am I gonna come crashing down after, like, am I gonna be at Disney for 6 months?
Right.
And that's it?
Yeah.
That was the biggest hurdle. Then you want to learn the tools, you want to learn the style. Also, as I told you, the people have been working on the movie. The crew gets like ramped up into the movie progressively. Mm-hmm. Some small sections start working maybe in November, October, and then by February, March, everybody's working on the movie. So I joined the movie at the time when it was like full steam ahead. I think we started doing overtime like a month after I started. It was like thrown at the deep end. You need to produce. You need to learn the tools. It's Maya. You've used Maya before, but what Disney Studio has, like every studio that work with non-proprietary software, still they have a ton of like scripts and proprietary tools. You have to learn all that. So yeah, it was intense.
Gotcha. So did you latch on? Was there anybody there that you kind of latched on to and they kind of helped you navigate, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, people were amazing in there. Like, and there was a sense of like, people, I got to sign a buddy that was like, how do I publish a short? A lot of stuff. Leadership was amazing in the movie. It was surprisingly less corporate than I thought it would be.
Less what?
I was preparing corporate. I was prepared for a more like corporate thing, and in a way, the atmosphere in the studio was electric for some reason. I don't know. I think we knew we were making a good movie, and there was a lot of like social activities, hanging out together, late hours, but it was easy to be vulnerable around people that were becoming your friends. I'm like, oh shit, how do I do these? Things like that. And and then when we were doing overtime, everybody was staying there late. So like, it's not that you run into a problem when you're like alone in the office.
The 2 a.m. when you're by yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, now you mentioned as an artist the psychological part. Was there anything in the practical animation part that you kind of had to pick up? Was the style that difficult for you initially, or you pick it up pretty quickly?
Yeah. The appeal.
Okay.
The sense of appeal at Disney is king, and the something that I emphasize when I teach is that if we are doing a workshop and it's like 6 weeks or 2 months, whatever, you're not going to become an accomplished artist by the end of that time.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to become an accomplished artist by the end of a Disney movie, just from the beginning to the end. It's an ongoing process. The thing that you can get fast, if you set your mind to it, is to be a better critic of yourself. So something that I learned very quickly is that some things that I thought were really good when I was doing them back, like in some smaller studio where the standards were not as high, not to say anything bad about the smaller studio, but they have smaller budgets, they have less time, things have to be okay, when maybe in a place like Disney, they're like beginning to get there.
Gotcha.
You know? So learning that was very important. And that was like learning the note process, what I was telling you about, like learning how to hit the note, learning the spirit of the note, what is needed, beginning to see your shot more critical, not being satisfied with something that you might have think it was okay before. In that sense, that was very important.
Gotcha. Well, you mentioned teaching, and one of the things I love about not only getting a podcast in with you, but I know you're going to be one of our instructors here coming up on our new term. So it's always neat to get such high professionals here teaching our students. What do you look forward to in regards to teaching your students here? What's an area that you like to emphasize in?
That is the first thing, the most important thing, the thing that I told you, like learn to be critical, you know? Okay. Because the appeal, but mostly like, because it applies to appeal, it applies to mechanics, it applies to polishing, anything, is that you need to evolve in the way that you look at your shot. Gotcha. You know, if by the end of the course you're not happy with the shot that you've done, let me tell you, you're never going to be happy with the shot that you've done. Okay. No matter what. You can be Glenn Keane. You're never going to be happy. Always something you could do better, right? Exactly. If you walk away from it having change as a critic of your work, that's the fuel that you need to keep improving. Gotcha. Because you're not going to be satisfied. And then you do something a bit better, but then if you think that what you thought was good in your last shot, you think now that it's not good enough, you're on the right track. So that's the most important thing. How to be a critical animator and in a way that is constructive, not in a way that demoralizes you, but in a way that every shot is a learning experience. Nice. Very nice. That's the most important thing. And then first principles always. Like timing, spacing, appeal, all those things. Because for some reason, we tend to forget about those things. It's the most basic sometimes are the ones that are like the ones that you overlook the most. Gotcha. You know? Yeah. Like being consistent with your first principles, like, I don't know, timing, spacing, line of action, silhouette. All those things. I just think it's neat to be able to get someone like you who's been everything else. I'm sorry, go ahead. No, since everything else is like you build on top of that. Yeah. It's just neat to be able to get someone like you has this experience at a high level, who that polish, that level of fidelity is been in your DNA now to come and train that for our students. That's very, very cool. Thank you. Now at Disney, you've got to work on Frozen, Encanto, Big Hero 6, Moana, Zootopia, Wreck-It Ralph, or Ralph Breaks the Internet. What's been one of your favorites of your time there? Zootopia and Moana. Okay. How come? And Encanto. Zootopia was an amazing movie to work in. because Zootopia is a political film, and when you work in animation and you get to tackle themes that are important to society, it feels rewarding.
Gotcha.
Working on Talking Animals was a dream of mine, and that movie has like amazing characters. It was a great movie. It was also a movie where they were remodeling the building, the hat building.
Oh yeah.
So we were all sent to this warehouse in like, for the people that don't know LA, it's like the suburbs, like industrial areas surrounded by warehouses, trucks, and an airport nearby, and like wall fences. Like it was like walking around prison, you know, like you're and we used to joke
like I'm at Disney.
Like, yeah, totally. But then it was an open plan. It was so much fun. It was so rowdy. It was like a lot of hours, but also a lot of camaraderie.
That's awesome.
You could hear a bunch of people laughing about something in the other side of the studio, and then the laugh would like propagate. You know? So that experience, we did Zootopia and Moana in there, and it was amazing. And Moana, because I got to work with John Maskell, Ron Clements, directors of The Little Mermaid.
Gotcha.
Aladdin. Remember I told you I saw The Little Mermaid, and I was like, this is what I want to do.
Gotcha.
And I was able to tell them in person.
That's amazing.
The last day production, and it's such a fun movie. It was such a privilege to work with them and see them work and think, and the sense of who they are as human beings is like. So those two are like special in my heart. And then Encanto is such a good movie. Supervising at Disney was another dream of mine. Working with the crew that we got there, those characters, the characters that I supervise, I love them. It was so rewarding to like. Encanto came out in theaters, and I was so excited that it was going to come out in theaters because I'm a romantic, maybe, I know. Streaming has opened so many possibilities. I love that. But opening in theaters, there's some all magic to that.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
It didn't do very well. And it was disappointing because it was a movie that I believed so much in the movie. You know? And so I'm so proud of that movie. And then it opened on Disney Plus, and it went crazy viral. And also I was one of the supervising animators on Bruno, the song, and working on that song. I love that song so much. And you know, sometimes when you work at Disney musicals, there's always kind of the radio friendly song that everybody knows, and there's the storytelling song, you know, the one that is more like being a musical that tells you about character, that has like quirky melodies. And those usually are the ones that are the favorite of the crew. And for once, the favorite of the crew and the one that went viral was the same song. You know, so it's like, oh my God, I'm so happy. We did some pretty new stuff on that show, like in terms of layout, and wanted to bring choreographies. Because traditionally in Disney movies, the characters are singing, but they're singing and doing like things in their life. And this one was, the directors were like, we want to go full Broadway choreographies. We're gonna have people singing and dancing, and nobody's questioning anything, you know. But at the same time, it was a massive ensemble number with tons of people, and the song was amazing. Yeah. And we put so much work into it, and it's like, okay, and then people are gonna love like the most like radio friendly one, but no. Like, not only the movie was the #1 streaming movie in the world, but also Bruno was like, everybody knew that. So
you got to work on two with like that Frozen and Encanto with those songs that are just get teeth into people.
Were singing "Let It Go" in the studio. By the time the world were like crazy about "Let It Go," we were already like, "Oh my God, it's everywhere!" Because we had been living with that song for a year. You know, people were singing that song around the studio when we were animating because it's so catchy. And you'll be on your car home and it's like, "Let it go." And then the whole world caught up.
Yeah. So you got to work on two that primarily those songs went viral there. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, well, before we wrap things up, I kind of always like to get a little bit other personal stuff. Is there anything that you enjoy doing outside of animation?
I was gonna say no, but that's I should get more hobbies though.
Yeah, I guess so.
Because I draw for pleasure.
Okay.
I mean, drawing is still a very important part of my workflow, but I'm not drawing like 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
Used to do. So I like drawing. I love reading.
Oh, okay, very cool.
It's something that
You picked that up?
No, I've always loved reading. It's something that
Interesting. That's awesome.
It's almost like a form of meditation now. It's like
problem solving and figuring something out.
Yeah, and I'm not using screens. Like a book. I don't want screens in my life when I'm reading. I love music. I'm trying to learn to play the guitar. Love going to concerts. That's kind of.
Did you say rigging or reading?
Oh, reading. Books,
I'm sorry.
rigging.
I thought you said rigging. Okay. No.
Reading books. No.
Better go on.
That wouldn't be a hobby outside of.
Okay. I just thought, that tinkering and problem solving there. Yeah. Okay. So reading. Okay. I love reading. Yes. Yes. Fantasy, history, things like that, or anything?
Literary fiction,
history,
science. Those are my main, like my main go-to.
Gotcha.
Genres. Yeah. I love a good fantasy book, but it's hard to come by, at least for me. Like, I think I started with Lord of the Rings, and everything else to me seems like not that cool.
Gotcha. Well, I've got a series that I'm working on right now, and very, very Lord of the Rings-esque to a certain degree. It's called the Wingfeather Saga. It's very, very good. They said they've kind of likened it like Lord of the Rings meets The Princess Bride.
Nice.
Yes.
I love The Princess Bride.
Yes. So it's got a lot of cool action, but a lot of good humor too. So for anybody wanting to listen to that, check that out, the Wingfeather Saga. So I'm getting to work on the episodic on that right now. So.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. So if you like fantasy and reading, definitely check that one out.
I read also this fantasy book called The Name of the Wind. Amazing book.
Okay.
The Name of the Wind.
Very cool. All right.
Some coworker recommended it. Yeah.
Awesome.
But I don't read that much genre. Because it's hard for me to read maybe because I work in movies, you tend to see like the kind of the tricks of the trade, storytelling. So with a lot of fiction, it happens that I get a bit bored because of that. But when you find something that is good fiction, but with fresh, like it's like making a good Disney movie, It's like you want it to be always the same, but you always want it to be different.
Yeah. You're like, okay, they tricked me, they got me.
Yeah, when you achieve that, it's amazing. So I'll check that one out.
All right. Well, Valentin, I really appreciate your time on this podcast. And like I said, I'm really looking forward to you joining the crew and teaching at our program here. So I know you're going to be a great asset. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. And with that, we're out.